question that has to do with that. The first question is, I'm a father of a 4.5-year-old autistic son, and I want to know if it's helpful for me to come to CARD from Pakistan, and how much it will cost for me. So there's a lot of things that are entailed in that, including plane tickets, and I know we would have no idea. But can you speak to the fact that somebody can bring their child in?
Yeah, and this would be, I mean, we have a lot of families that do come in just for an evaluation, and they come in from all over the world.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure what this family wants, but so I'll talk a little bit about all the different things that we can do for families who are far from us.
Okay.
So yes, if you bring your child in, of course you'd want to schedule something with me first. And that would be several months ahead. My schedule's pretty packed, but like for instance, if you were to contact CARD today, which you'd be contacting the CARD headquarters and asking for an appointment with Dr. Granpeesheh, then you would be directed to Kathy Viscondi, and she would then probably give you work with your schedule since you're in Pakistan, and try to get you in around like between the end of this now and the end of the year, sometime this year. And then you come in, and depending on what your child, we would do a bunch of questions on the phone first, send you some information that you'd fill out, so we'd get a pretty detailed idea of what your needs are, what your child's needs are. So for instance, if your child hasn't been assessed ever or in the last year, we'd set it up so that when you're here, you'll not only get to meet with me, but you'll have a series of testing done at our assessment clinic, so that before you leave, I actually have the opportunity to review the testing with you and tell you sort of this is what this shows and this is what we need to do and so on. We'd also have you complete skills ahead of time so that we have that profile of your child. So we'd have a lot of the ability, I guess, to review your child with you while you're here, and it might be we might ask you to be here for 2 to 3 days, and that would be the evaluation, and then we would produce a report from it for you, and then okay, so then the treatment aspect. Even right now, I mean, if you come to CARD, I personally can assess you, but you don't need to come to CARD. We do have kids all over the world, and we have what we call, remote services supervisors who travel to help families such as this family. And the process for remote services is that a therapist will come to you, or I'm sorry, a supervisor will come to you, and then they'll evaluate your child and assess. It's a different type of evaluation. It's more of a functional behavior assessment and a little bit of like an indirect assessment, because they won't be able to do testing, and obviously we will definitely do the skills index or the assessment. So you'll get all of that in the evaluation, and then you will get a program, and the supervisor, let's say, would stay for 3 days, 4 days, and they will then either assist you in hiring people around you, so students or other, let's say in the Asia, most of the people that we hire are, for instance, people who have immigrated in from the Philippines, or there are, nurses that are looking for work, or teachers that are looking for work. I would imagine that in Pakistan, we'd probably be looking for nurses, teachers, or college students, university students, and then you would hire them, or we can also hire them, but regardless, we train them, and we oversee the overall program, and we place everything in your home, and we sort of the program, the log books, everything. We set your home up just like we would if you were here. And then the supervisor connects with you on a weekly or bi-weekly basis through webcam, like Skype, and then also flies back to see you approximately anything between 1 to 3 months, every 1 to 3 months, depending on your child's needs. And we continue to train and oversee the group of people working with your child. So that's what we call remote services. In the past, we used to call it workshops. Now, that's one option of getting our help, and we do this everywhere. In fact, a few days ago, we're just about to start an affiliate. In fact, I'll talk about affiliates as well, because when we start doing this in a particular location, like when we started in South Africa or Thailand or so on, the number of families grows pretty fast, Shannon, and once it gets to a certain number, it becomes feasible. One of the families usually says, "This is fabulous, I want to help spread this in my country."
Right.
And so we had this experience now in South Africa, in United Arab Emirates, in Thailand, in Ghana, in Zimbabwe. It's just, and the families will kind of take ownership of a school or a clinic, or they'll say, "I'm going to be the sort of," it's like a franchise model.
Right.
So they'll essentially do sign up with card, and then we will take responsibility for training their entire school or their entire clinic over the course of the next 3 to 4 years. And they call themselves, for instance, our South Africa affiliate, as you know, is called Stars Academy, a card affiliate.
Yeah.
And so they follow all of our training. In fact, we've now not only trained their therapists, but their therapists have now gotten to the point where we've trained supervisors for them. So they have a whole batch of their own supervisors and staff. And we help them with the management. We still have, I think, 3 supervisors flying out there pretty regularly and assisting with everything and overseeing everything for them. But I mean, we're ready to fade whenever they want, but they sort of want us to hang around. Sure. And their quality is spectacular. It's fantastic. They have everything, our same evaluation process, everything we do at CARD. And they've now opened 3 more centers, and they're completely packed and doing very well and helping a lot of families in South Africa. So that's sort of what we do if it's a family who's interested in doing that in your own country. Otherwise, of course, you can move here, and then we would guide you on the phone and help you to decide where to move, and we're very happy to do that as well, and get you funding and all that sort of stuff. But that tends to be a little bit harder, especially because of visas and residence and all that sort of stuff. But there's many ways we can help you. And I mean, having said that, it's a long answer. Hopefully it'll help other people internationally as well. But another thing is that you can just do the evaluation or assessment with us, and then you can continue your program using Skills. Yeah. And that's what Skills was intended for, of course, and it's an online program that gives you the curriculum and program and tells you how to move forward.
And I have to say, you know, having said all that, you know, one of the greatest things is that you've given people options, that there are so many different options, so you can find a thing that works for you and your family wherever it is that you want to be. And, you know, I love that people have access to you. They have a little bit longer wait to have access to you. But I also want to let everybody know that when I started at CARD and my son came in, I didn't have a meeting with Dr. Granpeesheh. But I had the benefit of one of the biggest compliments I have to you, beyond the fact that you're brilliant and you are a visionary in the field of autism, is that you are able to convey that mission and train people who follow in your footsteps, who provide the quality that you would provide. And that is amazing.
I hope so. God, I hope so, because
I am a living, breathing benefit of that. I experienced that.
Right. And who did your intake? Evelyn or Sienna? No.
Sienna.
Okay, I'm glad to see. But then that is like one of the, and Sienna, of course, right now is in charge of our quality assurance departments. Like she evaluates all the supervisors. Right. So people here at CARD who are good do continue to move up and do become, they really do represent my dreams and hopes and missions. But it's hard because, Shannon, we have a huge staff. We're past 1,500 now, and I think by the end of the summer or by the end of this year, we'll be around 200 board certified staff. So it's kind of crazy amount of supervisors, and I just hope that they are really. It's hard to get them to think the way I think.
But you do I see that you worry about that, and you do a very good job of that. Yeah, and I would say to people, if you do the remote services, those are rock star people. Those are people who fly around the world, and they are rock stars.
That's true. John Galley,
and
who's
Peter
in charge
Farrig. I mean, and Sue Cho. These are rock star therapists who go and supervise these things.
Right.
They're the creme de la creme.
They're awesome, and their view. All of the ones you just mentioned have been here. Good Lord, many years.
Yeah.
Many years.
Yes.
And there's many others like that as well. But I was shocked because a few days ago, John Galley runs our remote services. He's the director, and a few days ago he asked me. He said, "I need someone else for South Africa because one of our other supervisors, Sarah Niehoff, who flies from Thailand to South Africa, is getting super busy in Thailand, right? Because we're about to open an affiliate in Bangkok." And I said, sure, that's fine. And I put out a notice to internal supervisors, and I couldn't believe the response. We got so many people that were just like, "Oh yeah, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it." And it made me realize that we really have a very large number of board certified supervisors. It's crazy.
It's exciting.
Yeah,
so just know that when you're looking at all these different models, don't think of it as something that gets further and further removed, because I see your hand and your vision in all of those places.
I hope so. And it's hard to replicate when you go it gets to this size.
Yeah.
But something else that I hope will help is, this year Jonathan Tarbox, as you know, Jonathan and I are writing the card book.
Yes.
And so God willing, we have to work under contract with Elsevier, so we have to finish it this year. Yeah. And when it's done, it should be out next year. And I'm really looking forward to that as well, because that will, God willing, really represent what it is that I want to say to the world.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Well, hopefully that'll work.
And it will live on in many different formats. That's you're leaving a legacy, and that's an incredible thing. And as a parent, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
We should take a quick break and come back with more of your questions. And always remember, if you need a follow-up, make sure that you do. Dr. Granpeesheh appreciates it when you send a follow-up if you have further questions, and we will continue to ask those. So stick with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. I just want to we had somebody who said, "Wow, thanks Dr. Doreen and Shannon for sharing the information about remote services. I am a skills mom from India, and it is great to hear about the many possibilities. I always wondered if remote services were as effective as the regular supervision, and your answer cleared that up. Thank you so much."
That's great.
Thank you for writing in, and we love that you're using skills.
And for the mom from India, we have a number of families in India. I'm not sure if you're all in the same location, but we should try to connect all the families out there, because we could do an affiliate there.
There you go.
And so it would be important to gather people. So I think if you want, just send in your information to Shannon, and then I'll get that and relay it to John Galley, who will have emails of other families.
Fabulous. Okay, moving on. We've got a couple of different questions that relate to being appropriate. One here who says, "How do I keep my 3.5-year-old from stripping down to his nakedness? We are potty training too, and he insists on stripping to go to the bathroom too. Teacher said he attempted to strip 4 times at school yesterday." Yow.
So it's a chaining procedure, so it's not a big deal. I mean, we can do it as behaviorists, but I would say, I guess you should start by putting clothes on him that are very difficult for him to take off, like for instance overalls or things that actually he can't remove that easily, and then you need to block it. So someone has to be there to prevent him from even starting, and just do what's called you'll be reinforcing on a schedule of just keeping it on.
Okay.
So it's not really non-contingent reinforcement, because it's contingent on keeping it on. So it's just sort of timed. It'll be a variable interval schedule. And so every 2 minutes you give him a reward and just say, "Good job keeping your clothes on." Then 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, and so on. And then gradually you'll change from, let's say, overalls to something else, and you'll just make sure that it generalizes. So that's not a difficult thing. I'm guessing that he started doing that when you started potty training, perhaps. Now, what will happen, of course, is that when he goes to the bathroom, someone has to be with him as well, and not allow him to undress, but actually just pull down, and then stop and do his thing, and then get his reward.
And we would reinforce for keeping what needs to stay on. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, it's like any other thing. You reinforce the desired behavior, and you disallow, or, you know, in this case, you just would block the undesired behavior.
Okay.
And that's a pretty straightforward thing.
Okay. And then in a semi-related question, a slightly older child, Dr. Doreen, my son 8 touches his private parts a lot. I have asked him why, and he says, quote unquote, that parts get stuck to other parts, which is pretty eloquent, right?
That's awesome.
How do I get him not to touch himself so much in public? Thank you for all you do.
Right. My pleasure. So that's actually a pretty interesting answer, and we always want to, I think you never want to ignore what your kids say. And so he might be actually either sweaty, in which case things are sticking to each other and making him uncomfortable.
Okay.
And you might want to check that. And if that's the case, there you just put some baby powder, or show him how to put baby powder on, so that it's not sticky and uncomfortable. Quite honestly. And you want to make sure also that his underwear is comfortable and all that sort of stuff. And also, you know, sometimes there are rashes and we don't investigate, and you want to make sure that none of that is happening. And of course, that is happening. You want to go see the pediatrician and get that taken care of. But otherwise, to answer your question, you know, touching your private parts or masturbation is a very typical developmental thing, especially with a physical thing that happens with children, typical children, boys, especially with boys. And so what we tend to do is we allow it in private. We teach our child that you can do this at night when no one's in your room, but otherwise you're not touching yourself. And then that actually then at least allows the child to have a fair goal. You know, Shannon, I'm very all about not only teaching our kids exactly what's normal, like any other child would do, but also making it fair. All right, so I don't want to take away something, and the truth is masturbation is a huge reinforcer.
Sure.
So I can't take away a huge reinforcer unless I'm allowing it at certain points.
Right.
So what you do is you just put it on a schedule, essentially, and you can, when the child does it, you will stop the child and say no, and then you will actually allow it at night. And you want your child to be able to differentiate that if they stop now, they can do this at night.
Right.
And then that will make it much easier for the child. Now, you know, I'm just describing this in very regular lay terminology, but there's very specific procedures, like you would really block the behavior by preventing it. You would want to make sure that your child has some understanding of the evening, whether it's like you know, you remind the child this is okay now to do it just before you leave his room, or you have a picture that depicts the evening bedtime or whatever it is. But you do want to make sure that your child has private time that he can do whatever, as long as you know, otherwise he's healthy. And that's the big difference. It's a matter of, and you know, if you want to make it really simple, again, I don't know the functioning level of the child, but if you want to make it simple, the difference between private and public is you're alone in your room versus are there people around? If there are people around, if you're not in your room, or even if you are in your room and there's people around, you're not private. Private is when you're alone.
Interesting. Very interesting. We have these kinds of discussions at home all the time because, you know, I've got a boy and he's of a certain age, and he's moved into this phase in the last year where he tells me all the time that I'm doing things that embarrass him. I breathe, and he says, "Mom, it's embarrassing to me." Right. And so recently I had a discussion with him about, you know, there are things that you do behind your door and that you don't do in front of me because it embarrasses me. And I saw the light bulb go off then, because he's all the time telling me he's embarrassed, and I don't think it had occurred to him. I don't know that I had talked to him about the fact that I too can get embarrassed.
Right.
And I saw him go, oh, okay, interesting. That hadn't even occurred to me.
It's interesting, actually, because embarrassment is one of those things that is a real strong sign of recovering.
Really?
Because normally you don't have embarrassment unless you're really good at seeing other people's perspectives. Because embarrassment is all about, what are they going to think of me?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting.
I hadn't thought about that. A reason to celebrate.
Oh, yeah.
There's always these silver linings and things that happen.
I always look for it. I look for things like, oh, he's getting embarrassed.
Oh,
that's pretty cool.
Almost everything I do embarrasses him.
That's so typical.
If I go to school and it's been a windy day and my hair is a little bit longer, and he'll say, Mom, you can't go to school like that. My friends say you have crazy hair and it looks bad. And I asked one of the friends, they never said that. That was just him saying it's what, because
it's what they're going to present. Yes, it's so amazing, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good thing.
My son also, like, he's very selective about who gets to take him or drop him off or pick him up or
Very interesting. Yeah. Okay, so it's a good thing. Okay, let's take another short break, and then we're going to be back with more of your questions with Dr. Doreen. Stick with us. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. I'm looking at questions that you guys sent in on Facebook this morning. Somebody wants to know, how do you get a child with autism to try any kind of new food? I've tried everything. I'm exhausted and feel defeated. I'm so worried that he will never, ever try something and will survive only on pancakes, waffles, baked chicken meat, and chicken nuggets. I'm sending you an air hug because we've all been there, haven't we?
Yes, of course, but it's actually not that hard. It's a pretty easy procedure, and it's 100% successful.
All right.
So let's start with that. Feeding is something we don't fail at.
Okay.
It's through ABA. You will use his current foods as reinforcers, and the food you want to introduce as something you assume it's something he just doesn't like. So you start with a tiny morsel of the food that you want to teach him to eat, and then a large amount of something he likes. Let's say you want to get him to eat broccoli. So you start with literally a tiny morsel of broccoli, like a half a teaspoon.
Okay.
And he would then take that, and then he can have his plate of pancakes. Otherwise, he can't have pancakes.
Okay.
That's very simple. Then once he's really easy with that and fluent, and that's happening, could take a day, 2 days, could be a week, whatever, then you will increase the amount to a spoon. And before you know it, you can gradually increase it to, let's say, a whole piece of broccoli, and then 2, and then I would just take it easy and leave that, and then you'll see that will add into his generalized foods. It won't be his favorite, but it'll be there. He'll take it when it's on his plate. Now, and then you go with other foods. Okay. And we have kids that come in, Shannon, who won't even put anything in their mouth. They're on a G-tube,
Right.
And so they're not chewing, they're not swallowing, and they won't take anything at all unless it's liquid. Mm-hmm. Even, in some cases, not even, water. So we will start with the smallest amount, but then also with like very, very little texture, consistency, and so on. So we'll often start with just a speck, like those decorating things on a cake, and we'll gradually increase size. Some of our kids have chewing problems. Yours doesn't sound like, because you're having pancakes and you're having chicken, and so the child's chewing and swallowing, so you're in pretty good shape. And it's just a preference. That's all it is in your case. So this is going to be pretty easy. I would start by talking to a nutritionist and getting a bunch of, since it's going to be a little bit of a battle, or it's going to take a while to integrate other foods, I would pick the ones that are the most nutritionally important.
Okay.
So, right now you have your proteins, and so what you're probably going for is fruits and vegetables, I'm guessing, because you didn't name any fruits or vegetables. Pick the ones that kids usually like.
Yeah.
Like vegetables, we're talking peas and carrots.
Right.
Typically corn. Now, although a lot of our kids have allergies to corn.
Yeah.
And then in terms of fruits, there's such a huge variety. See what your child likes and see what they need. Some of our kids need potassium, in which case you want to teach your child to eat bananas. Some of them need vitamin. So It's really about what your child's nutritional needs are. Fruits are usually not that hard to teach. Vegetables a little bit harder, but not really.
Okay. And so you mentioned the word battle, because I want to go back to when you were saying about, you're going to put that tiny, tiny, tiny amount on the plate and that they have to eat that before they can have the preferred food. But what I picture is the child refusing and getting down off the chair, and then the parent having to put them back on the chair and having it. And a lot of times parents would get into this discussion about you have to do this and whatever. And I know I've heard you before say, don't let it turn into that kind of a battle.
No.
So can you tell us a little bit about how we lay that out?
Right. Did this parent say the age?
No.
Okay. So I'm wondering if these videos are accessible to parents. I have several talks on feeding, and I have a number of really amazing videos which we should probably try to get to some families. They're part of these presentations. But if it's a younger child, you want to basically use a chair, what do they call high chair? Yeah, you want to use a high chair because it locks the child in.
Right. So the escape thing is off the table.
So they're not able to escape. And if it's an older child where they don't fit into a high chair, I really still would make sure the child is sitting at what I do is I'll put the chair in a corner, and then I'll put the table in front of the child, and I'm sitting on this side. So essentially the ends of the table block the child in.
Okay.
So the wall is preventing the child from running away. You really don't want to engage in any kind. You need to be dominant. If you're teaching, you need to be dominant.
Dominant but calm.
Dominant, but hugely reinforcing and calm. Yeah, never, one of the first things any therapist learns is the instruction that you give has to be neutral affect, completely neutral affect, because if it's not, your reinforcer is not going to have any power, and your aversive or when you don't give or when you're angry with the child won't differentiate. If you're constantly yelling at a child, it's the same with any other kind of training. If you're constantly yelling at someone, they won't know the difference between that. They'll habituate to your yelling. They'll just habituate. It won't mean anything anymore. It'll be your voice level.
Right.
So you don't yell. You simply just say, and you keep your instruction very low as well. Essentially, it depends on the level of the child's functioning, but the standard instruction is just take a bite.
Yeah.
Take a bite, and then good job, and here's your pancake.
Right.
And then gradually over time, it's take a bite, and you have a spoon of the thing. So in the spoon, there's either a tiny amount or there's a lot in the spoon, or there's you have to do 3 spoons of that. And then your reinforcer, which is the pancake, might start out with like a large amount, but then as time goes on, the new object increases and the reinforcer decreases. That's always the balance. So then you're just eating like you're eating broccoli, let's say, with the chicken nuggets.
Yeah.
And so that's essentially the process. It's not if it shouldn't turn into a fight, and the way you prevent that is by doing one trial and you walk away.
Right.
If it turns into a fight, that means you're demanding too much, and the reason I always tell parents not to turn it into a fight is because most of the time you lose.
Right.
So you don't want to lose. So you just go as far as you're successful.
Yeah.
My son, and this is another key thing also, which has to do with the stuff that your child is eating. Because sometimes chicken nuggets or whatever, the breading might be something he's allergic to. Sometimes our kids eat things they're allergic to, and then they actually won't eat anything else because that shuts down their entire digestive system. My son, when he was really little, used to drink a lot. Had just gotten into the habit of drinking chocolate milk, which my mother used to give him. And when he had chocolate milk, I could tell, because he'd have these really dark rings, and he wouldn't eat anything else at all day. He could starve. He didn't care. He just didn't care. So it had gotten to the point where it wasn't even enough. I mean, I had started by just saying, if you're not going to eat, you need to go to your room. So, but that was not even aversive enough for him. So it had gotten to the point where I would give him nothing unless he had 1 spoon of rice or 1 piece of chicken or whatever, and then gradually increase that.
Yeah.
So it's tough. It is tough.
I think though it's a real pivotal moment for parents when a therapist comes in, and I so appreciate that you say I'm exhausted and I feel defeated, this parent.
I know.
And then a therapist will come in and they'll put the piece of broccoli down and they'll very calmly say, okay, eat that little tiny bit of broccoli, and then you get the pancake. And as the parent, you stand there and go, as if that would work.
Yeah.
As if that would work. And then your child does it, you go, what magic fairy dust did you sprinkle? But I think part of it is just being calm, clear, and definitive, and not bringing other baggage and the fear that sometimes we bring as parents, that we're there, like, I need you to eat this, and we'll overtalk it.
Yeah, and the child usually at this point has figured out that if I don't do it with you, Mom, you'll forgive me and let me get away with it.
Right.
But this is someone new, and I want to impress this person.
Right.
And so I'll do it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like there's all this other stuff going on.
Yes.
It's a lot easier, and I have to say, when we do feeding here at the centers, it's pretty fast. I mean, we get kids from 0 to full normal diets very quickly within a few months. So it's not something to fear at all.
And if somebody wants some help with that, they can call the CARD 800 number and
call the CARD 800 number, and then we will assign someone to do it. We used to have a service called SOS, Specialized Outpatient, and feeding was part of it. And all of our staff are so trained on doing feeding that we just do it. But it really still should be a separate service. So, make sure if anybody at CARD says, oh, we discontinued doing feeding. We didn't really. We actually have feeding experts here. It's just that all of our supervisors can do this now. So, insist and say, I said we can do it for you.
Okay.
And we can. We'll set up a separate protocol. So, in other words, what I'm saying is we don't have to be doing intensive work or other ABA. We could just focus on feeding.
But you heard it. You can say, Dr. Doreen said.
And in fact, I'll make sure that admissions knows this as well in case you call.
Another question here on the live feature. Hello, Dr. Doreen. I have a question for you. When do you know when a child is ready for inclusion, or what are the signs parents have to look for to recognize and push the school to start doing inclusion? I know this is complex, but if you could give us some ideas or pointers for a kindergarten, first grade transition child.
Yeah, that's a terrific question. I have so many talks. I need to turn all these talks into some sort of video and just put them out there. Inclusion is a very important subject. So, your child's in kindergarten already, and now you're looking at first grade. When we do inclusion, well, you asked about signs. Signs, the only thing I really require is, for my child to go in, is the ability to pay attention most of the time to someone at a distance. Because the way we do inclusion is we start with, we do all our one-to-one at home to begin with when our kids are 2 or 3 or something. And then by the time they're 4 or 5 and they're going into school, we're already at a point where the child's pretty much doing everything for us and really competent. And one of the main requirements for school for me is some level of communication. So if my child's not really vocalizing or behaving very normally amongst other peers in terms of communication, it could even be nonverbal communication, but there has to be a level of functioning where I don't want my child to go in there and feel left out or feel isolated. So I want my child to be able to just mix in and follow very basic instructions from a teacher. Now the teacher is not the same as a therapist, because our therapists are kind of one-to-one in your face, and the teacher is at the end of the classroom. So we actually teach our kids that. We do that whole process. I mean, we call it mock preschool. So a therapist will actually have the child sit on the floor with stuffed animals or other dolls or whatever, and will sit at a table or a chair and pretend to be the teacher, so that our child will learn to respond to someone who's further away or writing on a board. We teach our kids certain preparedness skills, like, look, if you get lost, look at what's on the board. This is how you ask a question in school. look at the kid next to you and see what they're doing. We give them a lot of steps so our kids don't get lost.
Right.
And those are really the main things. But I mean, when we do it, we integrate with a shadow usually.
Right.
So we'll have one of the therapists go to school with the child for certain periods of time, especially free play time.
Yeah.
And then gradually the shadow will change, and we'll have, you know, a shadow the child doesn't know.
Right.
And then gradually we fade out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the main things. You would have a lot of thought on this because you went through it.
Yeah, you know, I move slower than anybody else, though. I think I'm overly cautious. I had just shared with Dr. Granpeesheh that today is Jem's first day of 5th grade, and that I'm, you know,
worried.
Well, no, I don't know that worried is the right word. Although that's sort of my part-time job, that I worry about everything always.
Sure.
You know, but you know, I'm having a lot of emotion about letting that leash be a little bit longer, and had lots of conversations with him about trusting, and but. You know, I do think that giving them the space to see what they can do and giving them opportunities to fly. Along the way, you know, there might be a day where we had, because we went from having a card therapist being there to our card therapist training a therapist who was going to be there to an unknown shadow. But along the way, there were days that the stuff just happened. Like a day where the therapist couldn't come because they had a doctor's appointment or something, and the person who was supposed to show up didn't show up. And maybe it was a short period of time, like an hour, that he had to be without a therapist, but he would demonstrate that he could. And some of those were planned, and some of them were just accidents, happy accidents that might have been planned to kind of force me as the reluctant mom to see that he could do so much more than he could. But I was so grateful that we moved slow, because he demonstrated that he could do the schoolwork, and that it wasn't just that we were throwing him in the deep end of the pool and hoping he would swim.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure. And you will always go at different speed. I mean, kids are very different. Some of our little girls can't wait to get into school, you know, so they fly. But it's not just about having the ability to fly. It's also about having the ability to make mistakes.
Yes.
And so, like, to fail. Because one of the things we want our kids to do is learn by failure.
Yeah.
You know, as also, you know, I've changed now, but I was also a very protective mom of my kids. And it's hard. I mean, you want your kids to always be successful and always be happy, but you really also have to just let them learn from their own experiences and from their own mistakes.
Yes,
as long as you're there to model the way to get out of the thing. Yeah,
and I think keeping tabs on what's happening and being not tied to a result, of an expectation of a result, but looking to see what's happening and adjusting.
Yes, that's the most important thing, is just being involved in what's going on.
I heard somebody recently talking about the fact that when a plane takes off from Los Angeles to go to New York, they have a map of where they're going to go, but then every 15 minutes they have to readjust course corrections, and that life is like that. And that really, you know, as a parent, I have to be, sometimes I want to be able to get it all taken care of so that I could maybe put it on autopilot, and I'm discovering there is no autopilot.
Right.
That I have to keep making course corrections.
Right. But I mean, and these are all just finding solutions to problems, right? Or issues that come up.
Yeah.
And at some point, we need to allow our kids to find those solutions themselves. So, like, for instance, in your case, you know, being concerned that he might get distracted walking from one end of campus to the other end.
Yes, this is what I was saying to her earlier, you know, that
But what will happen if that happens?
You know, eventually he'll wander back to the classroom, because my son, when he goes to the restroom, gets a little disorganized sensory-wise.
Right.
And so if he does that, he'll wander back to the classroom, and the teacher will report to me that he was gone too long, and then I will offer him a reward for going and getting back within a certain amount of time.
Okay, and or the teacher might even tell him, you're late, Jem, what happened, you know, and if I know him, I think there's a level of importance to him to fit in.
Yes.
So he might even self-correct.
Yeah, he
might even correct that without requiring an additional reinforcer. He might just, the aversive of being left out, or the aversive of embarrassment, might cause him to correct. So there, either way, it's just a longer path, but it'll fix itself.
See, this is why I need to be surrounded by experts, because I couldn't find my way. otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think those are really good things that you gave, though, for ideas of when to be looking for inclusion. We had a question that came in that somebody said, if you have time after answering parents' important questions, and I appreciate that you were asking for that first, can you answer my question? How is the BACB program, and they wrote on BIT, but I think you mean IBT. How does it work?
Well, IBT right now has a whole bunch of courses that are just based on our own training, CARDS training. I mean, they're not to get a BAC, to get a BCBA or Board Certified Behavior Analyst, to get that credential. You need to. The BACB is the board. It's the Behavior Analysis Certification Board, BACB, and they have a series of courses that you need to take at university level. And these are, if you're getting the BCABA credential, it's bachelor's level courses. If you're getting the BCBA, it's master's level courses. And these are like, I think 4 courses now. I'm not sure. Maybe they've added. Maybe it's 5. But there's a series of actual courses, university courses. At CARD, we have contracts with University of Nevada, Reno, and University of Florida, yeah, Tech,
Institute of Technology or something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm horrible with university names. Florida Institute of Technology, FIT, and they're a wonderful program there. And Dr. Martinez, if you're listening, I did not forget the name of the university right now.
It's still early in the morning.
FIT, and a lot of our kids, a lot of our therapists or therapists in training, supervisors in training, go there. CARD pays for that. If you're an employee at CARD, we pay for that, and essentially we support you through school. And when you finish those courses, then you need, or during the courses as well, you need a huge number of mentorship and supervision hours. I don't even know. I think it's 1,500 hours.
That was the number that popped in my head.
Right. It's kind of like a partial pre-doctoral internship that you do when you get licensed as well. So I think you need about 1,500 hours or something, and 750 hours of supervision. I'm not sure. There's a bunch of these requirements. IBT provides all that. Okay. Now, there was a recent regulation that said that for someone to supervise other BCBAs, you need a whole new credential. Our staff have that, so the IBT staff have that. Okay. That's why now they're doing a lot of trainings across the country.
Yes.
And if you attend their training, you are receiving some of those hours that you need towards your supervision or mentorship. And I think that's the best I can do. I would really suggest that you contact IBT. They'll tell you all about this.
We've been trying to book. We're going to have Catherine Peterson come on at some point to talk about all these things. She's a very busy lady, though, so we're trying to make it work with her schedule to have her come on and talk about all these things.
Or Cecilia next time. I mean, who's the director?
Yes.
Cecilia.
And she's busy times 12. But we'll try to get one of them somehow in on the show to talk about.
Next time they do a training for supervisors here, I would see who has an hour.
Okay. We will make that happen. We should take a break, but if you don't mind, I'm going to plow on ahead and ask questions. Okay. Somebody wants to know, have you ever seen kids recover with just ABA and no biomedical treatment whatsoever?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably about 2/3 of our kids who recover have no biomedical treatment at all. Okay. In fact, you know, if you go back in time, my kids who are now in their 20s and 30s didn't have any biomedical interventions because they didn't exist back then.
Good to know.
So when I started treating kids in like 78, 79 at UCLA, and then of course through CARD at 1990, there was no biomedical at all. In fact, the period between 90 and 95, I started gathering data because I was such a strong believer that there is some thing going wrong with our kids biochemically. And I started to, and it's funny, Shannon, because sometimes you're very kind and you always say you see that to me that I think of things in the future.
You do.
So back in 1990, and you have to realize the DAN organization came into place in 95, right? 5 years later. But in 1990, when I first opened CARD and I was writing out the questionnaires for parents to fill out, sort of the forms, it's the same form that we still have, and it has questions like, has your child had vaccinations? Were there any reactions? Has your child had ear infections, and how many times has your child been given antibiotics, and all that sort of stuff. And I wasn't educated enough back then to know how, taking too many antibiotics will kill flora, will produce sort of fungal infections and wreak havoc in your gut. But of course I learned that very, very early on through my dear friend Bernie Rimland. It's interesting that I was seeing that with my kids, and so I'm not sure how I got into this. Why was I saying all this?
Because the question was about, have you ever seen kids recover from just ABA?
Exactly. So my kids where I treated them, like Nick, he was in the very early 90s, and we weren't doing any kind of intervention then. Or you look at some of my other kids that are coming right now, any kind of biomedical intervention. I mean, I think I connected with the Dan group. Of course, I know Bernie for a very long time, and he put together the 95 Dan group, which didn't work out very well. And then 96 or 7, John Pangborn and Sid Baker and Bernie together really officially formed the Dan group, and they invited more doctors, and I think it really started to take off closer to like 97, 8 or so, and I was involved with them really involved and speaking at their conferences and so on from 2000 on, and I miss Bernie so much, and unfortunately that organization is no longer in place, but it is now, his organization, the Autism Research Institute, has more or less taken its place, but physician training isn't part of what they do anymore, but now there's the MAPS training, which is also very good. But anyway, a lot of kids never received biomedical interventions. Now, having said that, the world has changed. The toxicity levels have gone significantly up. So back in the 90s, we didn't have plastic. Okay, so we did not have, back in the 90s, Shannon, if you remember,
of course,
we were not walking around with plastic bottles. Everything was glass. And
you drank water out of the faucet.
You drank water out of the faucet. You did not have all these issues with toxicity, right? And our animals were way healthier, and it was just the beginning. I think it was mid-90s, I'm not sure of the exact date, but it was just the beginning of genetically modified foods. So now, 25, 30 years later, our water's bad, we drink everything, we eat everything out of plastic, we microwave plastic, we leave it in heat, whatever. All our food is, like 80% of our food is genetically modified. This is why now you see on regular TV ads for probiotics. I mean, good Lord, it cracks me up when I see these ads for probiotics. It's like we destroy ourselves. Let's take out all the healthy bacteria. Let's make sure no one gets healthy bacteria. So we're all pretty messed up, and now let's produce pharmaceuticals for this.
A whole new industry.
It's pretty fascinating.
Acidophilus and and all those.
So therefore, I'm not sure that I would recommend that you don't. What I do is I always tell my parents to just make sure your child is healthy.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
If your child is sleeping well and has a normal blood test and isn't showing signs like rashes or fungal infections or that sort of stuff, you're fine. Go on with the teaching, which is the ABA.
Okay. I have a question about schizophrenia. Can you have schizophrenia and autism? What is the difference?
No, I mean, officially by the book, you're not allowed to have both at the same time. You can't. It's it's like having a virus and a bacteria. The key difference, and this is a good one, is pretty much in schizophrenia you have hallucinations and delusions, and in autism you don't. Hallucinations are what you hear, delusions are what you see, and they are imaginary. So if you imagine people telling you things, or if you imagine seeing things that are not real, that's more in the realm of schizophrenia. With autism, or now ASD, autism spectrum disorders, it's not really those types of things. It's more basic. The processing of the brain is more or less delayed and not necessarily aberrant. So it doesn't go into a whole realm of abnormality. It just goes into delay. And so your child's not learning language the way they should. They're not learning social skills. They're not giving eye contact. They're delayed on certain skills. And once you're delayed on certain skills, your overall behavior looks strange or aberrant. But it's not really as abnormal as having hallucinations or delusions.
Okay, so if a child has been diagnosed with autism, later on, if they start having delusions, then their diagnosis of autism would go away and then they would have schizophrenia?
Correct.
And was it that they always had schizophrenia, or?
Possibly.
Okay.
Now, you have to understand that we don't know enough about, well, both of these diagnoses are not good.
Right.
So ASD, of course, is a brand new diagnosis that just came out. And before that, the autism diagnosis has been in place for many years.
Yeah.
Okay, so almost 20 years. So that's, pretty solid there. But we always had problems with it.
Yeah.
Like, it's a diagnosis that's based on symptoms is not necessarily the best diagnosis rather than based on etiology, causation. Schizophrenia, back in, I want to try to remember when this was, I think the DSM-3, you had a separate category that said childhood schizophrenia.
Oh.
So schizophrenia that could be diagnosed for children. And then I think they took it out in, I know for sure it wasn't in the 94 DSM. I'm thinking it was even out of the DSM-3
Okay.
So it could have been even earlier than 94, but it was removed. It could have been 90. I think it was removed 90. I'm not sure because I've gone through so many DSM diagnostic manuals. So it was removed, which basically said you can't really diagnose kids with schizophrenia. But then, after the 94 change, it essentially said, okay, it's a possibility that there are children who have this. It's a very, very minimal number, because schizophrenia usually will develop 18 and up.
Okay.
So that's sort of the kind of the mixture. But if you're looking at schizophrenia, once you get a diagnosis of schizophrenia, you would most likely be an adolescent or later. And the behavior, the things that go into having hallucinations and delusions are so profound and so they take over your life so significantly that medication is an absolute need.
Okay.
You cannot avoid medication when you're hallucinating.
Okay.
Period. So, it becomes like a whole different issue. It's kind of like you now need to deal with keeping hallucinations and delusions under control. There is no mental retardation association with schizophrenia.
Okay.
There is a delay. See, mental retardation is just a mental delay, right? And delays are more associated with autism.
Okay.
Aberrant behaviors are more associated with schizophrenia. I hope that answers the question.
No, that absolutely does. Thank you for clarifying that. I've always wondered that. And then, do we have time, Emily, for one more? Okay, one more that came in on Facebook. Is there anything besides melatonin that will help a child sleep? My son keeps waking up at 11:30 p.m. and staying up all night and day until 5, and the cycle starts again. And I know you've talked about this a little bit before, but this is a new question.
So the problem with melatonin on its own is that it often does this. It messes up the child's cycle. First of all, if your child's not sleeping, I would really keep them up when they're not supposed to be asleep. Like if they're asleep, don't let them sleep during the day. Like, very important. But I found that melatonin works better when it's combined with tryptophan.
Okay.
And that's why I love this.
You got me some of that.
Did you ever try it?
Yes, it's great stuff.
Doesn't it work? It's amazing,
fabulous.
right?
Yes.
You just can't do it more than 3 nights. If you do it more than 3 nights in a row, you need a night off.
Yeah.
So that stuff is called Tranquil Sleep.
Yes.
And it's you get it from Amazon. You can order it anywhere. And it's really good. It's a chewable tablet, 3 milligrams. So it's easy. You can break it for 1.5. You can take 2, whatever. And it's a combination of theanine with 5-HTP, which is tryptophan, and melatonin. And it makes it so much more effective. It may still wake you. You might still wake up 6 hours later or so, but you'll have more energy. It will make you sleepy. Now, having said that, melatonin or any of these types of things kind of natural things, you really do need to calm the environment as well. You can force yourself to stay awake even if you've taken melatonin, but so it's important for the family to make everything dark, quiet, etc.
Okay.
And of course, there's a billion sleeping pills that that are out there. I don't really recommend them, but sometimes another thing that Benadryl will tend to help our kids sleep. I know some of my kids take Benadryl, and that's pretty effective for them and pretty harmless too.
Okay. And Emily, I have to squeeze one more in because I promised. How can I get through my 16-year-old with Asperger's that finishing high school is the right thing to do? He's adamant about not going back. He thinks it's a waste of time, and he's not going to apply himself. I offered him the choice to homeschool. He still refuses to do that. All he wants to do is draw and write and to hopefully get published. Please advise. Thank you.
That's a tough one. You essentially, I guess what you have to do is you have to connect what's meaningful to him, for him, to what you want him to do. So you want him to go to high school, he wants to write. I think what you need to do is make him realize that the likelihood of getting published is much less if he doesn't have a high school degree. And perhaps you want to take his favorite authors and show him that they all have college degrees. Or perhaps another more rudimentary way to handle this is just make a deal with him. In other words, do 1 year of high school and I'll give you money. And with that money, you can go and take a writing course.
Or self-publish or
something like that. Exactly. So it's really just establishing his main reinforcer is writing, I suppose, and his your main wish is for him to go to college. So the two things I would do is make sure that he realizes all of his models are or educated. Is it college or high school?
High school. High
school educated at least. And the second thing is to just increase the reward level. And having said that, it's not a reward is no longer a reward if it's free all the time. So it's hard to take away writing because that's an ability he has. But perhaps I'm not even sure how good his writing is. If his writing is not all that good, perhaps you try to find a coach, a writing coach, who tells him go back to college, go back to school because your grammar is off or your writing's not good or whatever it is.
How about this? We'll add to the pile here at Autism Live. If he gets his diploma, we'll do an interview with him talking about his book that he's writing here.
There you go.
So we'll throw that into the mix.
That would be awesome. That's exactly the type of thing you need. Something that's meaningful to him.
And I don't know that would be, but let's float that out.
Or take him on a trip if he graduates, or find the reinforcer that's powerful enough that you're willing to give him if he graduates.